SnowRunner series opinion piece video. Get your pitchforks ready.
But with that ridiculous introduction out of the way, welcome back to SnowRunner, y'all, and today we are going to be talking about the future of the Runner series once again, and I know that I've done some of these videos in the past, but this one I really want to hone in on as many different angles as I can, and I also want to talk about a couple of different things that I've been getting asked about in the comments lately. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and give y'all a little list of things I'm going to be talking about, and then we're going to dive into them one by one. So the things we're going to be talking about are the future of the series, where it is right now, and then community concerns and complaints that I see repeatedly, and finally, we're going to finish off with some final thoughts. So, let's start by where the series is going, and we got to talk about a little bit of, in terms of where the series came from. Now, if y'all are watching this video, and most likely if you're watching my channel, you'll know where this series came from. It started with Spin Tires, the tech demo, then it evolved into Spin Tires, the full game, then that evolved into MudRunner, then that evolved into all of MudRunner's expansions, which then evolved into SnowRunner, which we have today. Now, I think that this series has had an interesting life, right? It's had an interesting life. It's had an interesting kind of turn of communities, right? It's had an interesting life in the way that it started off as a very niche community, and then that niche community grew, and then that niche community grew again, and then eventually it became a very broad and wide community, and then it started kind of becoming a little bit more niche again. Now, having covered these games over the years, it's given me a lot of really valuable insight on kind of not only who is playing them, but who is watching them and the attention around different aspects of the game itself, or the games themselves. Now, I noticed that Spin Tires and MudRunner had what I would consider to be a sort of steady growth in, kind of a combination of popularity and community attention. Whereas SnowRunner was a little bit different in the way that it had a kind of so-so news cycle, like, leading up to it. And then when it released, it had a massive boom, a absolutely monumentally fast rise in popularity. And then it had a little bit of it kind of had a little bit of a level off. Then it had a drop-off, a fairly sharp drop-off, and then it started to trickle back up again. Now, I know that obviously there's going to be different receptions in terms of different games, and I think that you have a couple of different angles that people in the community take with this. For example, you'll have some that will look at the current state of SnowRunner and they'll say, game's dead. Don't even bother, don't even worry about it. SnowRunner is a quote-unquote dead game. And then you have people that will say, what do you mean? SnowRunner is far from dead, and they'll say if you look at other games in the modern space, you'll see a similar trend of massive boom in popularity, level off, big dip, and then trickle back up, which we have seen as a trend in other games as well. So that kind of lays my groundwork for the beginning of this video. Next up, though, we've got to talk about some of my biggest criticisms of the current state of SnowRunner, and I say these things as a massive longtime fan of this series and someone that does plan to continue to play this series into the future, but just know that going in, because some of these criticisms and concerns might come off a bit harsh if you didn't know that going in, but I promise they're coming from a space of being a fan of this series for a very long time, basically its entire life cycle, and being someone that wants to continue to play this series and wants to see it get better. And remember, my opinions are my own, and they are all, of course, up for discussion in the comments, but without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into some of them. First of all, I want to talk about official DLCs in regards to them feeling, especially some of the recent ones, feeling like there's been a lack of innovation and some of the game mechanics have felt quite gimmicky, and they have boiled down to essentially, take for example the firefighting, right? Take for example the firefighting and how there is no actual game mechanic of fighting fires. It's just, here, fill up this rebranded fuel tank with air quotes water and deliver it to a water drop-off, and voila, you've put out a fire. That doesn't feel very... It doesn't feel like a genuine game mechanic to me. It just feels like running the same thing around the map under a different name. Another one, and y'all, I'm sure know this, I've talked about this before, but the extremely ill-managed rollout of mods on consoles. Because if you go back years on my channel, modding on consoles in this series was something that I was making videos about back in the MudRunner days because there were people that wanted it back then, and it's become essentially one of SnowRunner's biggest features now. I mean, like, the #1 most, the highest trending console mod on the mod browser right now is receiving something like between 4,000 and 5,000 downloads a day. It's, like, ridiculous, right? And that was, of course, a huge step forward in this series, but I think the rollout of it was horribly botched. And this game's community is not immune in this situation either. And again, as I say this, I'm not saying that it's any, one part's fault, but here's the thing. When they rolled out console mods, before they had a RAM limiting feature that would basically only allow you to turn on a certain number of mods at one time, before they did that, there were people that were going in and enabling a ton of mods, and then they would crash their game because they would enable more mods than their console could handle, and then instead of, turning off certain mods or trying to, figure it out until it worked, they just immediately blamed the game and filed official complaints against the game, so much so that if the developers had not instituted the RAM limit, the game would have literally been removed from the Xbox and PlayStation stores because of all the people that were filing complaints against it, which then led to the RAM limit that was instituted being very aggressive and then making a lot of people in the console part of the community upset and angry that they could only use 1, 2, maybe 3 mods, and then that in turn caused some of those players to either leave the game entirely or just have general distaste for the game in general. And personally, I've always felt like the solution to this would have been to, instead of having a hard RAM limit, have a warning that pops up, right? Have have something to detect how much RAM the console has, which it can do. And if you go over that, have a warning message that'll come up just to tell you that, hey, this may cause your game to be unstable. And if it does, it's not our fault. And then you can either click OK to continue, or, I want to go back to disable some mods. But I almost wonder if the reason they didn't do that was because they were so concerned that people would do it, click OK, and then crash their games all over again, and then just go back to filing more complaints against the game itself. And the other thing I want to talk about is the absolutely ridiculous amount of infighting within the modding community over the course of this game's release. And this is not something I talk about very often, but I felt like it was worth mentioning because over the course of this game's life cycle, there has been so much back and forth in the actual mod community. Like, people in one camp will be like, well, this mod is awful because it's not realistic. And then, another camp will be like, well, this mod is awful because this person made it. And then another person will be like, well, all of these mods are awful because I just hate mods. And unfortunately, what this has turned into over the years of this game's release is a continued segmenting of the community to where instead of the larger, greater community that this game sort of had when it started, it's more boiled down into you have this sub-community and this sub-community and this sub-community, which is fine, and that's great, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not necessarily, it doesn't feel like it was because, oh, we're gonna do our thing and you're gonna do your thing. It was more like, well, I'm gonna be over here because I hate you and you make me mad, and, well, we're gonna be over here because we hate you and you make us mad. And it's like, there's so much of that in the background. And in some ways, it feels like it's pulled the game away from a lot of its original meaning and purpose, which was just to, have a great time off-road with trucks in the mud. Or, well, actually, I say trucks, but I mean, like, now this game's got so many mods. It's like it can be a car, it can be a truck, it can be a boat, it can be, planes that don't really function all that well, but they're still there. I mean, there's so many mods out there in this game. You can kind of make it whatever you want, and I love that. And at the end of the day, I do want to say I absolutely freaking adore this game, and I still love this franchise, but there was a lot of things that not only did I want to talk about, but I usually don't talk about those things because it just doesn't seem like something that, it's not even things I want to talk about, it's things that I feel like I have to when it concerns the future of this game and the future of the community around it. So do I feel like this game has the potential for a healthy future? Yes, I do. I do think it has the potential for a great future, but at the same time, I also feel like there are some changes that might have to be made. And I'm going to leave y'all with that question and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. But that's going to do it for this one, y'all, and I'll see y'all next time.